I shut the cellar door and slammed the iron latch into place, my breath sharp and fast. From beneath, a scream rang out, shrill, furious, and unmistakably hers. "Let me out! You're going to regret this!" I didn't answer. I just leaned against the wooden door, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, staring at the lock I had fastened shut less than 30 seconds ago. 10 feet below my boots, in the dark stone cellar that once stored mason jars of peach preserves and my grandfather's fishing gear, was Angela Rowe, the HOA vice president of our little Maple Ridge subdivision, and she was not there by accident. She had broken into my home, into my cellar, and now she was trapped. The cellar was cool and damp, lit only by a single flickering bulb strung from a nail. No windows, no way out. I could hear her fists slamming against the walls. She was panicked now, yelling things about lawsuits, about calling the police, but that was rich, because I had already called them. The sheriff was on his way, and I was going to make damn sure he got the full story. But how the hell did it get to this point? Let me take you back. 3 weeks ago, when all I wanted was to be left alone and grow tomatoes. I moved into Maple Ridge after my mother passed. She left me the house in her will. It wasn't fancy. One of those modest, single-story ranch homes with a tiny porch and overgrown rose bushes. But it was ours. I'd grown up here, running barefoot through the backyard, climbing the sycamore tree, and helping Mom can vegetables in that same cellar. Coming back felt like closing a loop in my life. I worked remote, data entry for a supply chain firm in Ohio. Nothing exciting, but it paid the bills. I liked the quiet, the birds, the slow life. But Angela Rowe didn't. She hated anything she couldn't control. Angela was what I'd call a smile-in-your-face, knife-in-your-back kind of woman. Always manicured, always dressed like she was going to a job interview, even if it was just to walk her dog or inspect trash bins. Her husband had left her 2 years ago, and ever since, she seemed determined to redirect that energy into policing the neighborhood. You left your trash can out a few minutes too long, you got a notice, grass 2 inches over the limit. Notice. Kids drew chalk on the sidewalk. You better believe you got a notice. But me? I wasn't just getting notices, I was getting warnings. It started small. A letter taped to my door. Your front yard does not meet the aesthetic standards of Maple Ridge. Next, it was the rusted mailbox post. Then the fact that my shed hadn't been repainted in over a year. Then the chickens. I had 2, Olive and Pickle. They never left the coop, never made a sound louder than a lazy cluck. But somehow, they were unsanitary and unpermitted livestock. I tried to be kind. I really did. One afternoon, I invited Angela over for iced tea. I even baked banana bread. Sat her down and said, "Look, I know you're just doing your job, but maybe we can find some middle ground." She smiled that tight fake smile and said, "Of course, Clara. I understand completely." The next day, my chickens were gone. The coop door was open. Feathers scattered. I never found them. That's when I stopped being nice. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every knock. I installed a camera above the porch and another near the shed. Something wasn't right. Then came the week before everything blew up. It started on a Tuesday. I was pruning the roses when I heard rustling by the side of the house. I walked around and spotted Angela. She was crouched by my cellar door. "What are you doing?" I asked. She stood up quickly, brushing off her skirt. "Oh, Clara, I was just inspecting the property line. There have been rodents reported nearby." I knew that was a lie, but I didn't argue. Not yet. The next day, I found the lock on the cellar broken. Not opened, smashed, like someone had come with a hammer and deliberately tried to pry their way in. And inside, everything had been rifled through. Old family photos scattered on the floor, my dad's fishing rods knocked off the rack. Even the box of my mom's jewelry, emptied. That's when I set the trap. I bought a new lock, stronger. I also installed a motion sensor inside the cellar, and then I waited. 2 nights later, it happened. It was 2:18 a.m. The motion sensor triggered my phone. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and opened the camera feed. There she was. Angela Rowe, in my cellar. Wearing black, no flashlight, just her and a bag slung over one shoulder. She was rummaging again, this time opening boxes, scanning documents, flipping through folders like she was looking for something. I didn't hesitate. I ran barefoot outside and slammed the door shut. She screamed, high-pitched and furious, just as I latched the bolt. "You can't do this, you're insane!" "I've already called the sheriff," I said through the door. "And don't worry, I've got footage." There was silence for a moment. Then a quiet, trembling voice. "You don't know what you've done." I didn't respond. Because in that moment, standing there with my hand on the cold metal latch, I wasn't sure what I had done either. But I knew this wasn't just about chickens anymore. It wasn't about weeds or yard signs or HOA notices. Angela had broken into my cellar in the middle of the night, searching for something she clearly didn't want anyone else to find. What was she really looking for? What secret was she so desperate to bury that she would risk jail time? And more importantly, was she working alone? The truth. I was about to find out more than I ever wanted to know. Because as the sheriff's headlights lit up my driveway in the distance, a strange noise came from under the cellar door. Not a scream, not a threat, a whisper, and it wasn't Angela's voice. The whisper froze me. It wasn't Angela's voice. It was lower, gravelly, almost like someone had dragged their breath through sand. I knelt slowly, pressing my ear against the wooden cellar door. Angela was crying now. I could hear it, sharp, panicked sobs, but underneath her voice, there it was again, a low murmur, a whisper I couldn't make out. Then, silence. The sheriff's truck pulled into the driveway, engine humming softly under the night sky. Sheriff Delaney stepped out, a tall, wide man with tired eyes and a permanent frown. Delaney had been the local law around these parts since I was a kid. He always wore his badge a little crooked and his patience a little thinner. I waved him over, heart still racing. "She's in there," I said, pointing to the door. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this, Clara? You locked someone inside your cellar?" "She broke in, Sheriff," I said. "I have footage. Check my porch cam, and the cellar cam too." Delaney took a breath and scratched the back of his neck. "All right, let's see the footage first." I handed him my phone and pulled up the live feed, then tapped the recording. Angela sneaking in, Angela searching, Angela getting trapped. His face stayed neutral as he watched. When the video ended, he handed the phone back. "I'll talk to her." He unlatched the bolt, slowly opened the cellar door, and pointed his flashlight into the dark. "Angela Rowe, this is Sheriff Delaney," he called down. "You all right?" There was a pause, then a shout. "She locked me in here. She's crazy." Delaney looked at me. "You said you heard something else?" I nodded, unsure if I should bring it up. There was a second voice, I think. He frowned and descended the stairs. I stood above, trying to listen. I heard Angela's frantic voice echoing from below, explaining, crying, spinning some story I couldn't fully hear. Then I heard Delaney's voice, calm and slow. A minute passed, 2. Then I heard Delaney yell, not a command, not a warning, a scream. I rushed to the door. "Sheriff?" No answer. I pulled my phone and tried to shine the light down into the dark, but all I could see was the bare stone floor, Angela curled in a corner, and Delaney's boots lying beside a tipped-over box. "What happened?" I called out. Angela looked up. He slipped. But something felt wrong. Sheriff Delaney didn't just fall over like that. He was a tank, built like an ox, the kind of man who could chase teenagers through a forest and not even lose his breath. I grabbed the edge of the cellar and climbed halfway down. Angela looked terrified, but not just of me. She kept glancing at the far wall, where a heavy canvas tarp had fallen across something bulky. "What's under that?" I asked. She shook her head. I didn't touch it. I moved toward it, ignoring her pleas to stop. The flashlight from my phone flickered across old crates and dusty trunks. When I reached the tarp, I hesitated. Then I pulled it back. There was a hole, roughly carved into the stone foundation, wide enough for a person to crawl through. Dirt crumbled at the edges, and from deep inside the darkness I saw something glint. Not light, not metal, eyes. 2 tiny eyes reflecting the beam of my flashlight. I stumbled back. Angela screamed. I told you not to open it." "What is that?" I yelled. "There's something down there," she shouted. "It wasn't supposed to still be—" Delaney groaned from the floor. He sat up slowly, blood trickling from his forehead. "Clara, call backup, now." I didn't ask questions. I climbed out of the cellar and dialed. While I waited for backup, I paced the driveway. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. My brain was on fire, trying to piece together what Angela could have been doing in my cellar, what she could have been hiding, and what the hell was in that tunnel. Why dig a tunnel in the first place? And why my house? 5 minutes later, 2 deputies arrived. I showed them the footage, pointed to the cellar, and then backed off. They went down. I stayed above, staring at the sky. It was starting to gray, dawn creeping in at the edges of the clouds. Birds began chirping. Then the radio on one of their shoulders crackled. "You're going to want to see this." They pulled up something wrapped in fabric. A box. Inside were sealed envelopes, yellowed with time and tied with string. One of the deputies opened one carefully. "What's that?" I asked. The deputy squinted. "Bank records, property transfers, legal documents, old HOA papers from 25 years ago?" Angela, now cuffed and in the back of the cruiser, shouted from the window. "She doesn't understand. I was trying to stop it from happening again." "What again?" I asked, walking up to her. She didn't answer, just stared past me, whispering something under her breath. I leaned in closer to the cruiser window, just enough to catch her words. "Some things are supposed to stay buried." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the cellar. A deputy's voice shouted up, "We've got movement in the tunnel." Everyone froze. Movement. In the tunnel that no one knew existed under my home. And that was the beginning. The deputies yelled for backup. One of them, Ramirez, scrambled up from the cellar with wide eyes, his shirt torn and dirt smeared across his vest. "There's someone, or something, moving down there. We need lights, thermal, anything. It's deep, deeper than it should be." Sheriff Delaney, still nursing the cut on his forehead, waved them down. "Nobody else goes in until we know what we're dealing with." I stood back, clutching my arms tight to my chest. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting long orange streaks across my yard. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Every shadow looked darker now. Every sound made me jump. Angela hadn't said another word since that last whisper. I watched her in the cruiser, rocking back and forth, murmuring to herself like someone who'd lost her grip on reality. But deep down, I didn't think she was crazy. I thought she knew exactly what she was doing, and she just got caught before she could finish it. More cars arrived, a white van from the county, a drone unit, a man with a scanner and thick gloves who looked more like a utility worker than a cop. Sheriff Delaney ordered the cellar cleared. They roped it off, dragged floodlights into position, and dropped a camera on a long cable into the tunnel. The screen flickered to life. We all watched. The tunnel stretched deep into the earth, rough walls, hand-dug. Narrower the further it went. Then the camera caught something, wooden beams, crisscrossed and rotting. A room. At first, it looked empty. Then a shape moved in the corner. It was small, human-sized, curled up. The operator zoomed in slowly. It was a girl, pale, eyes wide and blinking into the light. She raised one shaky arm, shielding her face. I gasped. "Who is that?" The man running the camera cursed under his breath. "Holy hell." Sheriff Delaney was already barking into his radio. "We've got a possible live individual, female, approximately 15 to 18, breathing, alert. We need medics down here, ASAP, repeat. We've got someone alive." I took a step back, reeling. How long has she been down there? Angela started shouting from the cruiser. She was supposed to be safe. They told me they sealed it. Deputy Ramirez yanked open the door. Who? Who sealed it? Angela's eyes darted between us. They did. The old board. The ones before me. The ones who started it. Delaney turned toward her. Started what? Angela's voice cracked. The program. We were stunned, silent. What program? I asked. Angela hesitated. Back in the 90s, the HOA, they partnered with a contractor. They wanted to create a fallout shelter, said it was for emergency preparedness. But it was a front. They were hiding people, off the books, no IDs, no records. The board changed. People moved away, but it never stopped. She looked right at me. Your house was one of the entry points. That's why she was on the board. My legs almost gave out. My mom? I whispered. Angela nodded. She helped design the plans. That cellar was always more than just storage. I couldn't breathe. I knew Mom had been involved with the neighborhood board years ago, but she'd never said a word about anything like this. She was the kindest person I'd known, always helping others. She'd never, or had she? I remembered the way she used to lock that cellar at night, how she'd keep her keys close, how sometimes I'd hear noises when I was a kid, and she'd tell me it was just pipes settling. Had I been sleeping above someone this whole time? The deputies moved quickly. Within an hour, they had pulled the girl out. She was wrapped in a blanket, eyes wild but breathing steadily. Her name was Ellie. She didn't say much, just clung to the blanket and stared at the trees like she hadn't seen daylight in years. I tried to speak to her, but she recoiled. A medic pulled me aside. She's traumatized, severely. Could be weeks before she talks. Sheriff Delaney sat beside me on the porch steps as officers continued moving around us. You all right? He asked. No, I said quietly. How could I be? He nodded. We're going to dig the whole thing up. Trace the tunnel. If there's more, we'll find it. I looked at the cellar. You think there are others? Delaney didn't answer, but I knew what that meant. Angela was taken into full custody, charged with trespassing, destruction of property, obstruction, but that wasn't going to be the end of it, not by a long shot. I went back into my house later that night, exhausted and numb. I sat in Mom's old chair, trying to make sense of what had happened. Then I remembered something. In the back of the closet in her room, there had been a box. Old, dusty, with a label I had never read before. I went to the room, opened the closet, and pulled it down. Inside were papers, photos, maps, and a folder marked Codebase, Project Safe Haven. I opened it slowly. The first page was a list of names. My mother's was at the top, and just before I could read further, the lights in my house flickered, then died. All of them. Pitch black. And from outside, just beneath the porch, I heard the sound of wood cracking. I froze, still holding the folder in my hands. The sound came again. Sharp, splintering. Like someone, or something, was prying open the cellar door from the inside. My phone was in the other room. The lights were out, and I was standing in my mother's bedroom, surrounded by boxes full of secrets I wasn't sure I was ready to know, but I had to move. I slipped the folder under my arm, crept down the hallway, and reached the living room where the glow from the moon barely lit the wooden floor. My eyes adjusted just enough to make out shapes, the worn couch, the edge of the fireplace, the hall mirror cracked from years of age. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen table and switched on the flashlight. A text from Sheriff Delaney had just come in. Stay inside. Do not go near the cellar. We're sending someone back out now. My thumb hovered over the screen, then another sound sent me spinning around. This time it wasn't outside. It was inside, from the basement. Not the cellar, the regular basement door next to the laundry room. A door I had locked since the day I moved back in because the staircase was unfinished and steep. My mom always said it was dangerous, but now I wasn't sure what else she might have been keeping down there. The doorknob jiggled. Then came a voice, a soft knock, and a voice that stopped my heart cold. "Clara?" It was my mother's voice. But my mother had been dead for nearly a year. I backed away, every inch of my skin crawling. The voice came again, muffled but clear. "Clara, honey. Open the door, please." I knew grief could play tricks on the mind. I knew I'd been through a lot in the last 2 days. But I also knew what my mother sounded like. That was her voice. Not similar. Not close. Hers. I ran outside. The cold air hit me like a slap. I darted to the street just as headlights turned the corner. Sheriff Delaney's truck skidded to a stop, and he leapt out with 2 deputies right behind him. "There's someone in the basement," I said, breathless. I heard her. It sounded like my mom. Delaney didn't question it. He signaled the deputies and unholstered his sidearm. "Stay here." They swept into the house, flashlights out, weapons ready. I waited on the curb, arms around myself, folder still pressed tight to my chest. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw my own breath fog the air. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When Delaney and the others returned, their faces were pale. "There's a hatch," he said quietly, "behind the furnace. Leads to another tunnel. It's newer, reinforced." "What's down there?" I asked. He looked at me, voice steady. "Rooms. 3 of them, all empty, but we found evidence someone was living there recently." "Did you hear her?" I asked. Delaney hesitated. "No," he said, "but we found a recording device. It was wired to the ventilation shaft. Someone's been playing sound from below. They wanted you to hear her voice." "Why?" I whispered. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." The deputies sealed the hatch and placed motion sensors around the property. Delaney posted a cruiser across the street and told me to leave the house for the night, but I refused. This was my home. I wasn't going to be scared out of it again. That night, I slept on the couch with the folder on my chest and a fire poker in my hand. By morning, I had gone through every document in the box: blueprints, meeting minutes from old HOA board sessions, notes written in my mom's careful, looping handwriting. They were building more than just bunkers. They were building holding cells, rooms for intervention, for re-education, for emergency management of displaced individuals. There were references to payments, contractors, blacked-out names, and a list of homes with secret modifications. Mine was one of them. So was Angela Rose, and 2 others still occupied by current board members. I didn't wait. I got in my car, drove straight to the first address. The house belonged to someone named Carl Whitman, current HOA president. Perfect yard. 2 flags, wind chimes on the porch. But the look on his face when he saw me walk up told me everything. He knew why I was there. "You've been in the files," he said before I could even speak. "I want answers," I said, "and I want them now." Carl sighed and opened the door. "Come inside, Clara. There's something you need to see." I stepped into the house, half expecting a trap. But what I saw stopped me in my tracks. The living room was clean, modern, but the walls, they were covered in newspaper clippings. Maps, strings, connecting faces and dates. In the center was a photo of my mother. Next to her, Angela Rowe, Sheriff Delaney, and Carl himself. "We were the last ones," he said. "The last generation who knew what was really going on. Your mom was trying to shut it down before she got sick. Angela, she couldn't let it go." "Why?" I asked. "What's in those tunnels that's worth all of this?" Carl swallowed. "Secrets." Then he reached under the coffee table and pulled out a black envelope. Inside was a photo. It was me, as a child, standing in the backyard. But behind me was a man I had never seen before. He was standing by the cellar, and he was holding a shovel. "We believe he was one of the first," Carl said quietly. "One of the originals." I stared at the photo, feeling like my whole body had been turned inside out. "He's still down there," Carl said. "Somewhere. And he's not alone." Just then, my phone buzzed, a text from Delaney. We lost contact with the motion sensor. The cellar is open again, and at that exact moment, something in Carl's living room began to beep, a small alarm under the window. He ran over, lifted the curtain, and froze. They found us. Carl dropped the curtain like it burned his hand. "Back door," he hissed. "Now." I didn't ask questions. We darted through the kitchen, past the coat rack, through the mudroom, and out into the dew-covered backyard. Carl slammed the door behind us and locked it with a bolt that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Then he pointed to the edge of his yard. "See that old shed?" he said. "Get inside." Now! The shed was barely standing, peeling paint, a roof sagging like a broken spine. But when he opened the door, I realized it was more than just storage. There was a trap door beneath the floorboards. "Tunnel," he said. "Goes under the fence, leads to the drainage creek behind the next subdivision." "You have a tunnel?" I asked, stunned. Carl gave me a grim smile. "Don't you?" We climbed down into a narrow passage that smelled like dirt and old paper. As we crawled, I could hear it above us. Boots on wood, someone moving through Carl's house, heavy, slow. "They're looking for the files," he muttered. "Everything we tried to bury, they want it back, but they're not getting it." I thought about the folder still clutched in my hand, about the pictures, the names, the map, about the photo of me and that man by the cellar. "What was this all for?" I asked as we crawled. "Why build tunnels under our homes? Why the secrecy? Why keep someone locked in a hole for years?" Carl's voice echoed down the passage. "It started after the floods. Back in '92, the city didn't have money for shelters, so a group of homeowners decided to build their own. Quietly, off the books. That was the pitch." "But that's not what happened." He shook his head. "No, somewhere along the way, it turned into something else. They began taking people in, off the grid. Some were runaways, some were bought." I felt sick. "Human trafficking?" I whispered. "Something like it," he said. "But worse. The board claimed it was salvation. They told themselves they were rescuing people, giving them new lives, but it was control, plain and simple." "And my mother?" I asked. "She was the only one who tried to stop it. That's why she kept it all from you." We crawled for what felt like an eternity until the tunnel opened up into a rusted metal hatch. Carl turned a crank and popped it open, and we emerged near a culvert, hidden in the brush behind a line of trees. My hands were shaking, my legs weak. Carl pulled out a burner phone and dialed. "They know we're onto them," he told whoever answered. "They broke into my house." I stared up at the sky. It was almost noon now, the sun a dull blur behind gray clouds. Everything felt unreal. Then I remembered the sensor alert Delaney had sent earlier. "The cellar," I said. "We have to go back." Carl hesitated. "Clara, you don't understand. If that hatch is open, it means they're ready to move again. That man in the photo, he was part of the first group. If he's still alive—" "I don't care," I said. "That's my house. And whatever this is, it started there. I have to finish it there." He didn't argue. We got into his truck, hidden 2 blocks down near a park. He drove us back to Maple Ridge without speaking. The neighborhood looked the same. Kids on bikes, sprinklers going off, someone mowing their lawn. But it all felt wrong. Like the truth was bubbling under every driveway, every mailbox, every manicured lawn. When we pulled up to my house, I saw the cruiser Delaney had stationed out front, empty. The front door was open. I stepped out slowly, heart pounding. "Sheriff?" I called. No answer. Carl stayed behind me, hand resting on something in his coat. I didn't ask what it was. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Furniture untouched, no sign of struggle, but the back door wide open. We stepped out onto the porch, and that's when I saw it. The cellar door, open, not just unlocked, wide open, hinges creaking softly in the wind, and something was written in chalk across the top step. One word, welcome. Carl pulled me back. "This is a trap." "I know," I said, "but we have to go anyway." I took the first step down, then another. The air turned colder with each footfall, like descending into a different world. By the time we reached the bottom, the bulb overhead had burned out, leaving us in darkness. Carl flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. Then I saw it. A new hole had been dug beside the old tunnel. Wider, cleaner, reinforced with steel beams. Something had come back, or had never left. I stepped forward, ignoring the terror in my gut. That's when we heard it, from deep inside the tunnel. Footsteps. Not one person, many, coming toward us. And then a voice echoed down the passage, calm, chilling, familiar. "Clara, we've been waiting." The voice froze me in place. Every cell in my body screamed to run, but my feet were anchored to the cold concrete. Carl stepped in front of me, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The tunnel ahead remained still, no shadows, no breathing, just the heavy air of something watching, something knowing. Then the footsteps started again, soft at first, rhythmic, but they multiplied. One pair became two, two became four. Soon it sounded like a procession, marching toward us. "They're coming," Carl whispered. "Get behind me." I didn't move. "I know that voice," I said. That was him, the man from the picture. Carl slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a pistol. He's not just a man anymore. The flashlight beam began to flicker. A static hiss buzzed in the air, loud, pressing, like 1,000 whispers crawling into our ears. Then the lights in the tunnel snapped on, all at once. Floodlights embedded in the ceiling, industrial, bright, clinical, revealing a straight corridor reinforced with steel panels. At the far end stood a group of 5 figures, and one stepped forward. He was tall, thin, wearing a white-collared shirt, spotless, not a speck of dust on him. His face was pale, eyes sunken but sharp. He walked like he wasn't walking at all, like the ground moved beneath him. "Clara," he smiled. "You look just like your mother." I clutched the folder tighter. "Who are you?" "You can call me Pastor Gregory," he said softly. "Your mother and I were close once. We started this place together long ago, before she lost her faith." "You kept a girl locked in a tunnel," I said. "You trafficked people. You experimented on them. This isn't faith, it's a cult." Carl stepped forward, aiming the pistol at Gregory. "Back up, right now." But Gregory didn't flinch. "You won't shoot me, Carl. You've seen what happens when one of us falls. The rest. Evolve." And just like that, the other 4 figures moved in unison. Their heads snapped toward us, eyes glowing faintly under the artificial light. Carl fired once. The bullet hit Gregory square in the chest. He staggered backward, but didn't fall. Instead, he laughed. Slow. Hollow. And then the wound began to close, flesh knitting itself back together like fabric being rewoven. Carl gasped. No, that's not possible." Gregory stepped forward again. "We are the fruit of the program. Human design enhanced by belief. By obedience. Your mother saw it, but she couldn't accept the price." My legs started moving before I could think. I grabbed Carl and yanked him toward the ladder. "They're not human," I screamed. Get out now!" We scrambled up the steps, out the cellar door, and I slammed it shut just as Gregory's voice rose again behind us, a sermon laced with venom. "Run, Clara. Run as your mother did, but the truth always finds its way back." Outside, the air was thick and wrong. The cruiser that had been across the street was burning, no sign of the deputy. Carl's truck was gone. The whole neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Then we saw them, standing on lawns, on porches, dozens of them. Neighbors, HOA members, even old Mr. Haskins who walked his dog every morning, all standing still, watching, silent, eyes glowing faintly. Carl turned pale. "They've converted everyone." I stared at them, heart pounding in my throat. The board, the tunnels, this whole neighborhood was never about homes. It was a farm. "For bodies," Carl said. "No," I whispered. "For minds." We ran, down the street, past mailbox after mailbox. The rows of houses, the flower beds, the trimmed hedges, they were all part of the design, a controlled environment, a carefully maintained illusion. And now, the illusion was cracking. We made it to the edge of Maple Ridge, just as the sun broke through the clouds. Police cars came flying in from the main road, lights blaring, sirens cutting through the silence like knives. But none of the neighbors moved. Not even when the officers stepped out, guns drawn, shouting commands, because as the first officer reached for one of the neighbors, the man turned slowly and whispered a phrase I'd never forget. The program continues. In the chaos that followed, flashbangs, tasers, screaming, I found myself on the hood of a police car, covered in mud and sweat, clinging to Carl and the folder like my life depended on it. Because it did. That was the day Maple Ridge was declared a federal incident site. They sealed the entire neighborhood within hours. But no one, not even the agents who came later, could explain how a man survived a gunshot, or why those people stood in perfect silence like puppets, or how the tunnels reached beyond the neighborhood into the surrounding towns. It wasn't just a cul-de-sac, it was a network, and someone had reactivated it. I never went back to that house. I never saw Angela again. I don't know where they took her. Maybe she was silenced. Maybe she was converted. But I kept the folder. I moved to another state, changed my name, started over, and yet, some nights, when the air is still and the power flickers, I hear my mother's voice again, whispering from the walls, telling me to keep running. But I won't, because now I know the truth, and I'm not running anymore. I'm going to burn the whole program down.